So we have a very distinguished panel here talking about leveraging partnership in accessing markets in China. So actually, when I was asked to moderate the panel, I asked the organizer, how do we define markets here? Are we supposed to only talk about commercial issues or partnership to access the commercial side of the markets, or actually it's broadly defined as including innovation, R&D as well? And look at the panelists, you can imagine. We have Wheaton, who you have heard before in earlier panel this afternoon, from GSK, Director of Business Development Strategy. He will talk more of his experience on R&D side as well. And we have Emma in the middle. Emma is a partner for Clifford Chance in China. So she will bring with her a lot of experience and expertise in addressing commercial partnership. And we have Paul Casey in the middle. He's the VP and Head Asia for Corporate Development in Quintiles. And of course, Quintiles is one of the top players for clinical development. So I'm not going to read through my bio from the panelists. I will let themselves introduce themselves for maybe 2 minutes each, and then we will move on to the questions and discussions.
Should I start? So my name is Paul Casey. I'm the head of corporate development for Quintiles Asia. I think corporate development means a couple of different things to a couple of different people, but from our perspective, it's all about how do we participate in the growth that's taking place across all of Asia. We have specific markets that we're very focused on, and obviously China is one of those. I've been in the company with Quintiles since 1993, and so I've seen a great deal of growth over the time, and I've seen our evolution move from the Western markets to the Eastern markets. Personally, I've been coming out to Asia for the last 10 years, primarily starting out in Japan, moving to Singapore, and then spending a fair amount of time in China, Korea, and India over the last couple of years. We are very focused on how we continue to participate in not only the regional activities and the global activities that take place out here, but also, more importantly, the local activities. And certainly I think today's topic is one that's very much top of mind and top of frame for us.
So, hello. Hi, my name's Emma Davis. So I work with the law firm Clifford Chance. I've been based out in the Asia region since the mid-1990s and in Shanghai since 2000. I head a corporate practice of Clifford Chance in China, basically helping clients with M&A activity and joint venture investments in the market. I head our life sciences practice for the Asia region, and about 80% of my business relates to clients who are in the pharma sector or medical device sector who are expanding their footprint in the China market.
And my name is Wheaton Little. I'm based out of Shanghai. I work for Worldwide Business Development at GSK, which is the research and development, business development organization. I'm one of the directors of business development, and I'm particularly focused on the Asia region. And so this includes a lot of trips to Japan, Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, and throughout China. Let's see. So I think what we wanted to do was sort of now reverse the order and go into kind of what our experiences are.
Yes. So I thought in discussing the topic for today's panel, the key questions, what do you see as the biggest challenge in terms of accessing the markets of China? And then from there, what's your experience or what's your thought about the best practice or what's the best way to actually using partnership to address those challenges?
Right, so I think I'm going to start. So I'm as part of the research and development organization at GSK, we come into contact with a number of challenges bringing medicines into the Chinese market. And so what I thought I might do is just give a little bit of background. Not everyone may be aware of some of the particularities of making medicines for the Chinese market. The first thing about the Chinese market and the regulatory, the SFDA there, is that you can either, so predominantly GSK has had two choices. One of those is to use a first-in-China strategy, where the first-in-human trial is really in China. And that has very particular requirements for it. One of those requirements is that manufacturing happen in China. And so that the first in human trial is using material that is manufactured in China. Currently, we do not have a pilot plant for trials in China, and so by and largely we haven't pursued that. There are advantages, however, to doing first in China INDs and first time in human. There are market advantages. So I think if you look at Biopharma's icotinib, Biopharma will probably be able to take advantage of a certain period of market exclusivity that they were afforded by going into China with a first in China strategy. The other choice that GSK has had is to take our existing medicines, which are approved outside of China, and bring them into China. And for that, there are also certain particularities which you don't run into in some of the other countries, developed or otherwise. One of those is that there needs to be a PK study where you prove that actually the Chinese population, by and largely, clears the medicine from that the bioavailability is similar to those studies that were conducted in the West or wherever else they were conducted. And the second thing is a registration trial, and the registration trial is has to be statistically powered and prove that the efficacy is similar for the Chinese population as it is for the other populations that it was tried on, for phase 3 trials. Part of that registration trial is also sort of an additional test of safety, and thus, even if a powered trial would be as small as 50 people, the SFDA really requires that actually, for small molecules, it's sort of generally around 100 people. For biologics, it might be 300 people. We heard earlier today that for biosimilars, it may be up to 600 people. And so you really have to take into account what the investment is going to be for the medicine that you are intent on bringing to the Chinese market. I'm just going to take a couple more words to talk about sort of the considerations. Part of the considerations revolve around whether or not you will be able to get reimbursement. As we saw from IMS, 35% of the market is TCM, another sort of 37% or 33%, I don't remember which one, of the market is generic. And so you're really dealing with actually, as a percentage of the Chinese market, you're dealing with a very small percent that's focused on innovative medicines. And an even smaller percent may be reimbursed. Let's see, so what else do I have here? The final thing that I'd like to say, and then maybe we can go in and I can come back to partnering later, but the final thing that I'd like to say is that the feedback that we're getting from the regulatory agencies is crucial, because despite having a large number of guidelines, the details of what satisfy those guidelines aren't always clear. And so being able to communicate with the SFDA on a regular basis about the specific indication that you're thinking about bringing your medicine to China for is invaluable. And actually, I would point to that as being one of the larger opportunities for partnership if you're able to negotiate that effectively with a partner.
Thank you. And Paul, so we didn't talk about development regulatory hurdle. I mean, you work with all the multinationals as well as maybe domestic companies as well. So how do you see what's the best way to overcome such hurdles?
So it's interesting. Wheaton talked about two approaches. One is bring your own products in. The other is to find some stuff locally. As a service provider, Quintiles is always looking at the best solutions to provide to its customers, and in all markets. But in China, it's very interesting. What we are challenged with is how do we effectively deploy resources on behalf of pharmaceutical companies? How do we effectively manage clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies? How do we effectively deploy sales resources and manage sales resources for pharmaceutical companies and biotechnology companies in a cost-effective, productive, efficient manner? when we look at China, we have sort of two things that we're going against. One, we've got a large presence there that really works on global studies, but then there's also the whole local market that Wheaton is talking about. We're challenged with how do we address that market, and so from our perspective, we look at we've got a couple of options. One option is we go and we build a local delivery model to support the likes of GSK as you guys are building out your infrastructure and trying to get products registered locally. And so that would be the organic approach. We can go buy our way into the market, and go look and see if there's some M&A targets locally that provide similar services but at the local level. And that would be the inorganic strategy, or you can go and find a JV partner in China. Interestingly enough, we've faced all of those opportunities. We've looked at every one of those, and quite frankly, we've pursued and are pursuing all three of those. So it's not quite an easy answer to say what's the best one. I think it depends on what answer, what question are you trying to answer. I think when you try and look at the different opportunities, a couple of questions I think you have to ask yourself as a company is what are the dynamics of the partner you're looking for? What do they bring to the table that maybe you are not able to offer? How is it going to further your ability in the local market? And then probably the biggest challenge, at least from my perspective as I've seen it out here, particularly when you're talking about acquisitions, particularly when you're talking about JVs, is the potential risk profile of the company that you're looking at in China. And that's not a finger-pointing comment. I think that's just a reality that Western business practices are slightly different than Eastern business practices. And from a Western standpoint, and Emma, maybe you can probably fill in a little bit of the color here, but from a Western standpoint, we are very used to having all the T's crossed and all the I's dotted. And I think when you look at local partners in the Chinese market, and you can say this about most markets, but particularly in the Chinese markets, you're not going to have that. And again, I think it's just a dynamic of the market that a company like a Quintiles or even a company like a GSK or a Roche has to determine if they are ever going to get comfortable with that. And as we go through the next couple of minutes, I certainly have a couple of questions I'd love to ask Emma on how you structure those relationships so that everybody is quote unquote protected, yet still getting the benefit of the assets that you're acquiring, be they a company or the assets from a development standpoint. So not a simple answer. I think there's multiple avenues, and we certainly have pursued and are pursuing all of those. One last comment I'd probably make about partnerships in China is obviously the role of the government. You can't deny their influence, you can't deny their impact, and you can't deny the importance of the accessibility. We've had a few conversations with some of the local governments that are tied into the central governments, Shanghai, for instance, and certainly it's critical to be able to access that voice. It's critical to be able to access that knowledge and that network, and I think that part can't be lost.
Great, Emma.
So sure, thanks very much, Paul. I think compliance is a huge issue when you're looking at partnering with local players in the China market, and I can talk to that a little bit more as we go through this discussion. But I think just to first of all turn to the broader question of pharmaceutical companies and what sort of alliances they're looking at in the China market and why. I think looking from my clients' experiences, I think there are two main reasons why companies are looking to partner with players in the China market. And one is obviously to acquire product. And I think it's been discussed already this morning, the difficulties of bringing your own products into China and the timelines that involves, but it can be a 3 to 5 year time period. And companies obviously want to grow faster than that. So one way is to accelerate the process is to find local product in the market and to acquire it through acquisitions. So I think product is one. The other one is when people are trying to find a sort of broader capabilities in the China market. So that might be R&D or manufacturing or commercial capabilities. Now, in terms of who you partner with and in what ways, I think it depends if you're looking for innovative drug opportunities or if you're looking to expand your presence in the branded generics market. And I think both of those areas are of keen interest to many multinationals. If you're looking at innovative drug opportunities, historically, there have been very few deals done in the China market, and I think that's because there remains a sort of low R&D capability in the innovative drug space in China at present. And so many companies, when they're looking to expand their innovative product portfolio in China, are actually looking at international alliances with other multinational players. So, for example, last year, Pfizer signed a co-promote arrangement with Daiichi Sankyo for a cardiovascular product. And it was a very good match between the two companies because Pfizer had a very large sales force and commercial capabilities in the market. Daiichi Sankyo had a very good product, which was also already authorized for sale in the China market, but had little sales force, so wasn't able to generate the revenues. And those sorts of international alliances, I think, will continue. But perhaps the area that people are more focused on and are also very interested in is the alliances with local players. And I think most of these alliances are directed at the branded generics market. And I would divide the types of deals being done into two types. I'm speaking as a corporate lawyer here, but there is sort of the small play, which is where companies already have, organically grown quite significantly, but they're trying to add to their product portfolio. So they're going out and looking at smaller players in the market who might have some interesting products within their product portfolio, and they're selectively acquiring those products. Usually through an asset deal. So you don't acquire the equity in the company, you just acquire the licenses and registrations and perhaps the manufacturing capability. And there's a number of those deals being done, in some ways below the government radar, because these are being done at a provincial level with local government support. And the companies are successfully doing these deals. They're taking about 2+ years to conclude, and they're gradually building up their product portfolio in that way. And then I think the second type, which perhaps we can talk about further if people are interested in it, is more the sort of big play. And you'll see in the last 18 months there's been a number of examples of leading pharma companies who are entering into genuine joint venture partnerships with leading local players. And examples of this would be Merck has announced a deal with Simcere. Lonza announced a deal with Fosun, and Pfizer have announced a deal with a leading API player called Hyson. And you're looking at genuine joint ventures, and for me this is a new development in the market, and I think for these companies is in many ways an experiment, because they are basically more aggressively expanding into the branded generics market with a leading local player in a genuine partnership, and having to reinvent the business model to create a more premium brand of generic in a compliant model of doing business. And whether or not that is going to be successful, I think, is an open question.
Great. So as you can hear from the panelists, a wide variety of experience, advices, expertise. So I think one key theme is that each partnership is different, depends on your objective, depends on what you're looking for. Are you looking for innovative product sourced from local in China, or are you saying that I need a partner to help me to develop or commercialize the product? And then that product, is that a generic, is that a biosimilar, is that innovative products? Each different types of partnership will have different challenges. So I don't know, from the audience, do you have any questions to guide the discussion, saying that which type of partnership you're interested to know more, or which particular challenges you are particularly concerned about trying to find solutions? I think this is a great opportunity to leverage the experience and expertise of our panelists. Any questions?
Sure. Hi. Thank you very much for an interesting insight. My name is Anand, and I'm a healthcare investor. I wanted to basically get some insights about the ability of emerging markets, predominantly China, in coming up with new chemical entities, new NCEs, new molecules that can possibly be a blockbuster. So how far are we in terms of seeing that kind of a scenario? And secondly, what are the challenges that you think still needs to be overcome for such a possible scenario to take place in the future?
So I think your questions about China's capability or likelihood or timeline to come up with new NCEs that potentially would become blockbusters on the global market.
That's right. Because there's so much of interesting developments that have taken place in China in recent times that we all now kind of like agree that yes, it's a superpower. So what next?
Okay.
In the field of life sciences?
So I'll let Wheaton comment on it first, and then I can add a few.
Yeah. So in terms of a Chinese-made blockbuster, I think we can point to many of the multinational footprints in China as working very hard, both in conjunction with the biotechs in China and the academies in China to try and get a blockbuster NCE that's coming out of China. From the non-multinational side, I do think that there are a few key large local players that are intent on becoming a source of innovative blockbuster NCEs. I also think that we're going to see a lot more innovation. I think we've started to see it truly. But I think we'll begin to see a lot more coming from the fledgling biotechs that are run by all of these returnees and are the direct beneficiaries of the vast amount of cash that's being poured into China. When I think about China, I think this is kind of the third stage. China first developed manufacturing capacity, then it developed CRO capacity, and this next kind of 5-year plan of the government, I think we're going to see a lot more innovation coming from biotechs that are recipients of the amount of the cash that's floating around these parks, the biotech parks.
To answer your question specifically, Anand, if any of us could answer when the next blockbuster is going to come out, I don't think we'd be sitting here, right? We'd be placing some bets. But I mean, I agree with you. I think I think the amount of research that is going on locally in China, the fact that MNCs are making such an effort locally, the amount of money that's being poured in there, the returnees that are coming, I agree. I think it all sets the stage for innovation coming out. I think the other question you ask is what are the challenges or what's the rate limiting factor? I think ultimately it's going to come down to the quality of data and the quality of the assets. And quality is something you hear over and over and over again, but you can't mask quality. And so I think as more of these local companies are looking through research and looking through the development process, it will be critical that they are following a globally accepted quality standard to meet all needs, from a FDA, EMEA, et cetera. So I think in my mind that's the biggest issue. But I think all the pieces are in place for that with additional training that's going on locally in the market with returnees and all the things that we've just said. I think the infrastructure is certainly there.
So you actually reminded me of the second part of the question, which is the challenge. And I think everything you said is very apropos. The only thing I would add, which you reminded me of, is that I think that one of the challenges that we need to see tech transfer in China be more efficient, more expedient. In the last time that the last panel I was on, I was talking about Gordon Zong's organization, which is essentially a private tech transfer office. And by privatizing his approach towards tech transfer coming out of an institute in Shanghai, he's been able to really ensure that the quality of patent is there. And that's something that I'm not sure we've always seen coming out of universities in China. So I think that there's some things that the government can do to increase the quality of tech transfer from Chinese academic institutions. I think we're already seeing private ventures that are intent on increasing the quality of innovation coming, or the quality of IP protection on innovation coming out of the best academic centers in China, and I think that will lend itself to funnel into the biotechs that we're seeing.
I got a quick question, or just a follow-up. So timing. So everybody always talks about China speed and how everything gets done very quickly. You mentioned transactions taking 2 years. Maybe I misunderstood you, but is that what you said? And then you talked about the speed of the tech transfer. So do you see time as a continues to be a rate limiting factor? And the original question was to Emma, but
You want to go?
So certainly I think when clients come to us and talk about partnering or acquisitions as a quick route to market access in China, I tend to stop them right there and explain that deal doing in China is slow, and every 4 deals that I'm involved on, I think 1 probably closes. So deal failure is also very high. Often deals fail at the due diligence stage just because of the compliance issues or the difficulty in agreeing valuation. So I think as a rough rule of thumb, your average deal, small scale deal, takes a couple of years. And I would say for your big profile deal, you're probably looking at 3. And actually, these joint ventures I've been talking about, you also have to appreciate that there's a long period before you have a fully commercially launched joint venture. So you're looking at probably another 3+ years to get all products across into that joint venture and being fully manufactured by it. And that's with a strong local player who's got a good relationship with the SFDEA. So it takes time.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a real time factor in terms of the tech transfer. I do think that the negotiation process may be longer, and part of that honestly is because from what I understand with our experience, that there's been occasionally there's been wrinkles around what the PI, basically the PI's control over their asset, and trying to negotiate sort of the best possible terms for the PI as opposed to necessarily what is going to be appropriate for the university as a tech transfer office. The only other thing that I would say is that there are delays. We've talked about some of the regulatory hurdles in terms of taking your own medicines in that are FDA approved or from EMEA. And then I guess the last point is I would just point to icotinib, which Beta Pharma took a first in China approach. Will be the beneficiary of a certain period of market exclusivity. However, I believe they've already registered. So if anyone knows differently, please correct me. I believe they already registered. There's going to be a delay before they hit market, and part of that's because they need to get their supply chain in order, which is not necessarily trivial.
Yeah, so I think the timeline of let's differentiate the timeline of doing the deals versus the timeline of reaching the market. That could be very different. In terms of a deal making, really depends on who you're talking to. So I think the deal Emma talked about is mostly with domestic players doing commercial deals. If we are talking about R&D stage deal, dealing with a small biotech run by returnees who worked in big pharma in the US
It'll be a lot
before,
quicker, I think.
then that's kind of much faster. Yeah. And dealing with academics, then the issue is that a lot of the issue we can talk about is in different universities, there are different rules about who owns this thing, right? So, or who's the decision maker. So it often takes a while for us to figure out, is the PI who's going to say go, no go? Is the university, is the tech transfer office? A lot of times, the last minute, someone said, hey, hold on a second, I actually am the decision maker, so why didn't you run through the contract by me? So I think that's why each university is different, and each system is different. You have to sort it out pretty quickly, who is actually the decision maker and who can sign on the dotted line. So I think then in terms of timing to the markets, I think regulatory, SFDA, you do have to work with them very proactively across different levels of details from IND to NDA. I mean, that type of interactions and challenges, I'm sure we can spend a whole day discussing this. And anyway, well, 3 seconds over, unless anyone has any other urgent questions.
We have one question back here. I realize we've talked a lot, so you should, if you have questions.
Phil said one more question.
Yeah, sorry. I've just got one quick question about if every player in the Chinese market probably are worried about the healthcare reform. So it's been ongoing for for the last decade, and so I mean, still the reform is still going on. And in the last decade, I think we see a dramatic increase in the healthcare insurance coverage, but the government again is determined to further reduce the healthcare burden to make it more affordable to the people. So I mean, I think just in this month in the National People's Congress, the Minister of Health is again trying to reiterating the government is determined to push on, for the healthcare reform. So what do you think that the ongoing reform in the next decade is going to affect that MNC's operation and maybe also the partnerships in China, how essentially what the challenges and maybe opportunities that's associated with the healthcare reform? Sorry, it was quicker than my first one.
Quick comments. It's a big question. So one sentence or two sentences from each panelist.
Yeah, maybe just one or two.
I mean, from my perspective, I think it opens up a lot more opportunity. I mean, you're trying to get more products in the hands of more patients. That means there's going to be more demand. That means there's going to be more information. That means there's going to be more requirements for innovation, studies, commercialization. So, I mean, I think it's a very positive thing.
And I think that actually puts more pressure on each company to think about your strategy. Are you going to target the product that's going to put on the EDL, which means that huge volume but pricing pressure, or are you going to focus on product segments that's more innovative but really saving lives? Therefore, you may be able to charge a premium price, but then you have to deal with the lack of reimbursement. So I think nobody has the right answer. Depends on what your portfolio are and which direction you want to go. You have to make decisions pretty quickly which strategy you want to follow. And then I think, as Paul said, there are actually opportunities. No matter whatever you say, as IMS, our colleagues Andy said before, the market is growing.
I concur. I mean, I think the only thing that I would mention, which is something I forgot to say earlier, is that I think there is an opportunity for companion diagnostics to really demonstrate value of a certain medicine to a certain segment of the population. And I think, with healthcare reform in China, we'll probably see that as being something which is valuable.
Join me in thanking our eminent colleagues here. That was a very thought-provoking conversation. Thank you.